Hello, good morning once again. Thanks for staying on the AM show. And that was a really blunt opinion from my colleague, Benjamin Akakpo, comparing Ghana to where we were and where we are and what we can do or where we can be. Well, we zoom into our big stories today, and we are starting off in Parliament. As you may be aware, business from the Finance Ministry has been put on hold till Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta accounts for COVID-19 funds. That hasn't been done. We had an assurance that he was going to do it yesterday. He didn't appear. Also, we'll talk about absenteeism in Parliament. The Privileges Committee has summoned Lansah to appear on July 6th. Our guest to have this conversation on issues from Parliament is Dr. Rashid Rahman, Executive Director, the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. Thank you so much for your time here this morning, Doc.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with the issue of absenteeism in Parliament, because that precedes the decision not to continue doing business with the Finance Ministry because of the Finance Minister's inability to appear before the House. I don't know if you've been following this story about the committee in Parliament asking Madam Lansah to appear. She granted an interview to my colleague Blessed Suga, saying that she hadn't received any notice from them and that she had permission, or she had spoken to the president and the president was aware of her situation. And so, well, she has some sort of permission not to be here in Ghana. Your quick thoughts on this and how the back and forth has been since the story broke?
Well, thank you very much. I think we have to make a distinction here. She has two roles that she plays as a minister and as an MP. As the president can grant her permission to be absent from her job as a minister of state. But when it comes to Parliament, I think it's a different story altogether. And indeed, her case is a test case for the Privileges Committee and for our Parliament, because over the years, if I can put it this way, the weakest link, I think, in our democratic setup is the issue of representation. In our country, unlike many other jurisdictions, there is no way of checking representation apart from the member showing up in Parliament and representing the people. In many parliaments around the continent, there is a dedicated time and budget that's allocated to the representational role of members, so that at specific periods, Parliament knows that the members are in their constituency, they are doing the work that they have to do, which is, if you like, the most important or the aspect that defines our country as a democracy, representation. Now, we have a situation here where the honorable member has been absent, and I believe that this can only happen in Ghana. And we are, dancing around legalities. This honorable member is all over social media, all over the news, yet she does not know that the Privileges Committee wants to talk to her. It's very baffling, if I can put it that way, and it makes our Parliament lose its relevance. And I think that is very important that the leadership of Parliament, takes this matter very seriously.
All right.
And have a cut-off point when all this drama and back and forth must stop. The people need to be represented. The honorable member needs to show up. She needs to be in Parliament and she needs to do her work.
Doc, without sounding insensitive, she says that her child is not well. She needs to be outside the country to be there, to be present for her child. She has duties to perform here. She's been away for so long. What do you think should be the decision both by her party when it comes to representing constituents of Domi Kwabenya and her job also as a minister for gender, considering that yes, she may have a genuine reason to be away, but for how long can we say that it's okay to be away for?
You know, in other jurisdictions, the honorable member will do the honorable thing. If this is becoming untenable, balancing family, which is very important, and her official duties, you know, in some places, the honorable member will do the honorable thing by saying, you know, this is now becoming impossible. I tender in my resignation. If it's for a short period of time, it's understandable. But you see, this raises even a much bigger issue for you and I, for the ordinary Ghanaian. You know, we have a health system in Ghana, don't we? And the politicians are the ones who are supposed to fix this health system so that all of us, when we are sick or when we have challenges, or I mean, personally or for our children, at least we can stay here and be attended to by the health system so that we don't, you know, end up in future in situations like this. You know, if she was in Ghana and her son is being taken care of by our health system here, she can still do her duties as a member of parliament, isn't it? And in that case, nobody will prevent her from, you know, attending to her family duties and at the same time doing her parliamentary duties. You know, and secondly, you know, the other bigger issue is what is really happening within the executive, that, you know, there have been calls by many Ghanaians, even as recently as yesterday. I've heard some professors saying, calling on the president to maybe ask somebody else to perform these duties if this minister is unable to. I mean, what is going on in our country that this minister looks like she cannot be touched? I think that's a much bigger question for our executive branch of government to answer.
So Doc, back to my question. So there's an emotional aspect to this. She needs to take care of her child. Her child is not well. It may be affecting her personally. And yes, her constituents need representation in parliament. So back to my question, how long can we say, okay, enough is enough? This time it's gone beyond the time we expected it. And so, you know, either you resign or you are you know, relieved of your duties.
Yes, indeed. I think for me, defining a time might be difficult, but you know, you cannot be absent from Parliament for almost a year now. You know, and you cannot be absent from your duties for almost a year now. You know, even in organizations, when we all sign contracts to work, I mean, you are working at Joy FM. I think if you become maybe affected by ill health and so on, there is a period within which the organization will say, you know, we have gotten to a point where we need to get somebody to replace you, and then whatever compensation needs to be given to you is given to you, so that, I mean, you take care of your disability issues or whatever health issues there are. This cannot continue forever, and it makes I mean, our parliament and our governance system lose a lot of relevance. It looks like we are demonstrating that we don't have clearly defined structures and systems of dealing with issues like this. So if we do not have, I think that this is a test case, and we need to use this as an example to set these rules very, very clearly, because I believe this is not the first time. And if if Parliament doesn't handle this properly, then tomorrow, when is the turn of Mr. A or Madam B, people will be referring to this bad precedent that has been set, and you may not be able to do anything to people, I mean, at that time, because you'll be cited for being discriminatory in terms of how the matter is being dealt with. So I think, look, Parliament needs to be tough on this.
All right. Doc, before we move on to the finance minister's issue, the people gave her the job. They voted for her. What avenues are available to them in terms of registering their displeasure, and what processes can the people, I mean, beyond Parliament and the executive, can the people kickstart to ensure that they have representation in Parliament?
Well, I think we have the power of recall. I mean, I can't remember exactly. I don't have the constitution and the standing orders with me here. We can the members of the constituency can petition Parliament with, I mean, the established number of signatories in order to trigger, a process where they are saying we are going to recall our member of Parliament. But you see, again, on this one, I want to put it, I mean, maybe in a much broader framework. We are a country in which, we have a parliament that is currently not properly constituted, if I can put it that way, because there are people in somewhere in a part of our country that don't have representation in parliament right now. So maybe our leaders are thinking this is normal, it is okay. I mean, even if the people of Domi Kwabinya don't have representation, well, it doesn't matter, we can just gloss over it. But this is, again, making our representation, I mean, our democracy looks like one that is being challenged, I mean, by some individual and some personal interests.
So would you then say that from what you've observed, and even the examples you've given of Saul, and even look at the general performance of our legislators, do you get a sense that they represent more of themselves and their parties than their constituents?
There's something we call the compass of every member of parliament. And the compass has to, I mean, as you know, the typical compass. I mean, to the north is, I mean, the duty that they have to the constitution. And then to the east is the duty that they have to the people that they represent. And then the rest is party and personal interest. And so they face a dilemma each time they do their jobs. And across the continent, in many countries, many people say that when they are faced with this dilemma, a daily dilemma, because when they go to parliament, they vote, they take decisions. They say that the compass, I mean, usually points more towards duty to party and duty to personal interest, rather than duty to constitution that they have all sworn to uphold, and then duty to country and duty to citizens that they represent. And we are seeing a classic case of it here.
Doc, Benjamin here. Let's move the conversation forward. So apart from the infamous three, if you want to put it that way, and then Sarah Joasafa, who has been singled out for quite a lot, let's take a look at the finance minister and what has been happening. So a lot of Ghanaians have been calling for accountability. And yesterday, Ken Oforiatta, finance minister, was supposed to show up in parliament. That did not happen. And following from which some members of the minority were pretty agitated. And then the speaker said, look, we could go ahead and do this where until you come and fulfill this parliamentary requirement, you will not be allowed to bring any business into the House. Is that not creating a rather frosty relationship between Parliament on the one hand and the executive on the other?
Well, I think the Minister for Finance, as well as any other Minister of State, including you and I in our country, when Parliament comes calling, we don't have any excuse not to show up. And you see, this is becoming a kind of pattern, not only maybe in this current parliament, but we have seen that happen in previous parliaments. And then you see the members of parliament that belong to that particular party up in arms trying to defend this,
right?
Which is something that is supposed to make, I mean, that is the single most important role of any parliament in the world, ensuring accountability, because they have the power of the purse, as we call it, and they have the duty to make sure that whoever is given the duty to spend our taxes, spend our money, comes to the house to account on behalf of all of us. So if you have a situation where we have this, back and forth between the Minister for Finance and Parliament, particularly, if you put recent developments within the context of this, the minority has complained, and we have seen, particularly during the e-levy saga and during the last budget, when the minister wanted at the last minute to have discussions with the minority. Many people said this is the 11th hour, and you should have been doing this at the first or the second hour.
Is that to say the finance minister and his ministry are not acting in a proactive manner when it comes to Parliament?
Yes, that's what we are hearing, Benjamin, and that is my own experience observing Parliament. Look, the fact that you are a minority or you are opposition, and I've been telling this to the minority, doesn't mean, you should simply oppose. When the government is doing the right thing, the minority should call out the government and praise the government. At the same time, when there's a need to constructively engage, that engagement must happen. But if it doesn't happen, then first of all, the minority is saying to itself, well, a minister of state is telling us that we are irrelevant and he or she can get his way. Then,
well, an ultimatum has been given to him, so to speak, by the speaker himself. But maybe it shouldn't even have got to this. But what would the way forward be for you then on this substantive issue? Because like I said, it could, hobble the relationship between the executive and the legislative body.
No, I think not only the relationship between the executive and the legislative body, but I think our relationship as a country with the wider international community. Things like this happening in our country, investors are watching all these things and they make decisions in order to, bring their resources into our country, and our rating as a country and so on, all are being affected by happenings like this that are zoomed to the world, and everybody is seeing that we are demonstrating that there's a system that is not truly functional, and our leaders are not able to get together and come to a common understanding in terms of the issues of running the business of the state. So I think in the interest of going forward and building a very good relationship, particularly with the minority side, in the interest of our country, in the interest of all of us, they need to find a way to engage.
But a genuine question to wrap with, they need to find a way to engage. What if genuinely the finance minister doesn't have all the facts and figures and he wants to get ready, for example? Would you still suggest that he should willy-nilly come before the floor of Parliament? Because, Parliament is very unforgiving.
No, but Benjamin, I think there's nothing wrong with the finance minister coming to Parliament and saying, I don't have all the documents ready. I plead with you, give me a little bit more time. That shows respect.
But in this instance, will they tolerate that after all the water under the bridge?
Well, I think that, because of this history, yes, maybe they might not tolerate it. But, if at the beginning of it, he had shown up and said, look, I don't have all the details, give me a little bit more time. I think the minority will be understanding in this, and they ought to accept that kind of request. But if you ignore Parliament for a very long time, and then you show up later and say, I still don't have the facts, well, then I think that your issue of they being unforgiving might start to play out. In any case, I have to run now, Benjamin.
Yes, and we acknowledge that. Dr. Rashid Rahman, we're immensely grateful for your time. Executive Director, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. Up next, we'll be engaging security analyst Dr. Adam Bona. But you wanted to chip in something crucial, because it's not the first time.
Yeah, that's not the first time he's failed to appear to account for COVID-19 expenditure. So the bit on Parliament being unforgiving, like Dr. Rahman says, well, there's also the angle of respect, because and I'm sure there may have been some sort of agreement before it was put on the order paper that he was going to appear.
Exactly. So, I mean, the processes, like you're saying, it can't be put on there when agreements have not been arrived at.
All right, let's move on to our next big story, and it's about the Islamic SHS protests, which led to some clash between students there and the police. We know that the Deputy Ashanti Regional Commander, who was acting as the regional commander, has been interdicted and removed from his position. 2 other police officers have been interdicted over the matter. Thankfully, the students are doing well. We didn't report any casualty, but the videos were quite hard to watch. Seeing a couple of ambulances drive to the school to help attend to the students. But Asanso Boache, who is MP, wants the GES to investigate teachers involved in this matter.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because he suggests that some of them, on the back of everything, the turmoil in the country, are using this as a way of,
so they're using
stoking the fire.
Exactly. But remember when this news broke, our man, Ohiming was on the ground, and I put that question to him, that were there any teachers were involved? Well, overtly, we didn't see anything like that. I mean, not in our faces, but we don't know if behind the scenes the teachers were involved or not. The GES has procedures and they have ways to handle some of these things. But more on the security angle, we've been joined by Adam Bona, who is a security analyst, Dr. Adam Bona. Thank you so much for your time. I remember we were having a discussion on this and we couldn't end it because we had to cross over for a live event, but thankfully you've been able to join us. So it's just fair enough to pick up where we left off, isn't it? So Doc.
Yeah, correct.
Doc, I mean, we've seen Ejura, we've seen Nkranza, and now this happened in Kumasi. The police admit that the right processes were not used in controlling the crowd. Doesn't this suggest then that there may be a problem at the training level when it comes to crowd control?
Well, good morning and good morning to your viewers. And then, well, yes, there may be a problem when it comes to crowd control, but the other bigger problem has to do with sometimes lack of supervision. If you take Kumasi or Ashanti region into this particular conversation, you will notice that the Ashanti region, to be specific, has become very notorious for some of these excesses. And I do believe that it is largely premised on the fact that some atrocities that took place over there in the past largely went probably noticed, but then unpunished. Nobody got punished. You can talk about the Aswansi 7, where 7 able young men were gunned down and firearms, bigger rifles were, put by them in the full glare of the public, that they exchanged fire with the officers who attempted to rob them, who attempted to arrest them. Eventually, the Interior Ministers Committee exonerated the dead. And no, these people largely were not punished, even though there were compensations were paid. You talk about Ejura. Ejura, you had some of these excesses where the police has to stand down for the military to go in and kill. Some people died in the process. Who got punished? You correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone got punished. Ashanti region, if you ask me, if you go into the annals of demonstrations and the annals of police brutalities, Ashanti region in the past and probably, has been very notorious. And
but
so
why is that so? Why is that so? I'm told the police has about 16 regions. And so if one out of that
18.
18 actually.
18 regions.
Okay, so
yes.
if one out of that is seen to have a particular problem, have we been able to diagnose why?
I believe that it is the reason why the current IGP has descended heavily on the senior officers. Go again into the annals of the police's own punishment and, punitive measures regime. You'll notice that the last time a senior officer at that rank was removed would have been when the police recruitment scams hit us, where one DCOP or a DCOP Timbila or something was interdicted and I think was put under something that looked like a house arrest, and he never came back again. And so to interdict within 6 hours of the IGP visiting Ashanti region, and also to remove the acting, Ashanti regional
director,
commander
of police,
the acting regional commander, who is a DCOP, that's the Deputy Commissioner of Police. It's the position you get to before you get to DCOP. And how many DCOPs do we have in the country? And so mine it takes a lot of balls. I have never seen that for the police's own internal. This is something you say it is for their own internal consumption. So for an IGP to descend into the region within hours when these things happen, and subsequently coming back to Accra and the letter, removing and interdicting, it's never happened. So as far as I'm concerned, it is refreshing. It tells you the new IGP is, he wants to ensure that the rots that we have seen in the past in the Ghana Police Service is turned out. We don't see it again.
Right.
And I am happy he took this decision to interdict 3 senior officers so that those who are watching, it means that nobody will be spared. If you are a Deputy Commissioner of Police, you are Assistant Commissioner of Police, if you are a COP, if you are Superintendent of Police, Chief Superintendent, DC, whatever, you are going to be punished if you misconducted yourself. So for me, I think that let's begin to have some amount of hope in the police. But if you take what's the name, Nkoranza is a bit different from what happened in Kumasi, because for the young people in Nkoranza to break the police cells and free suspect, for me, was a bit too much. And therefore, if you are not very careful and you compare Nkoranza to what happened when these young children, 12, 14 years olds, are open onto the street and you fire tear gas, chase them into their school. I mean, the Islamic University one, tear gas them and, literally get some of them pass out. For me, it was a bit too much. It's, it tells you someone didn't do his work well.
Dr. Bonner, Ben here. So, interesting points you make, and the differences are clear. But this removal, interdiction, if you like, is it not just symbolic? Will it bring about the sort of change we really need? Yes, one top official, 3, put together, have been asked to hang their boots for a while. Processes are ongoing. Is it not merely symbolic? Because you speak about the Asawasi situation and those involved. What happened? They were interdicted. Some compensation was given much later. But if I asked you today what happened to the police officers, would you be able to tell me? No. We all saw what happened with Azugu in the past, Ayasu West Wogon, and then until recently, another such incident. So I'm just saying, this is merely symbolic. What more is there to it?
No, it's not symbolic. It is not symbolic in the sense that if you ask me for Kumasi to be specific, I told you, go back into the annals of the police's own measures to do with, what do you call that, punishing one of their own. Usually when they will punish, you have some sergeant, some inspector, chief inspector, some
which is precisely why I'm saying it is symbolic.
But no, it is not symbolic, because you know what? Senior police officers pride themselves, they pride themselves with regards to, what do you call it? I'm a senior police officer. And you are talking about Ashanti region is the second most important police region in this country. If you take out where the IGP's region is, which is Accra, the second region in this country in the police's own, in terms of scale of preference, will be the Ashanti region. And so for the acting regional commander, and he was put in an acting position because the substantive regional commander, who is a good friend, was on leave. And so immediately when it took place, the substantive regional commander has been called back to post, and I think that a replacement for the removed and interdicted, acting commander has been made. If you ask every police officer or every security official, it is that bad. If to this level you are punished up to this level.
So you feel this is punitive enough? This is punitive enough in terms of setting an example, so that others would not follow suit.
Good. Yes, it's so punitive, and you watch. You don't need any research, but see how things are going to pan out in other police regions.
Okay.
You are going to see sleepy regional commanders will be awakened. There are some regional commanders who are sleepy.
Like where?
From now on, I wouldn't mention names. If you want to put me in trouble, right? I wouldn't.
I get to ask the questions. You answer those ones that you will.
No, they know themselves. So I wouldn't.
They know themselves, eh? Okay.
So they know themselves. They know themselves, and I've spoken to. I talk to almost all of them. They know themselves, and so mine is that if you are not doing well, you know you are not doing well. And if these things that happened in Ashanti region happens in your region, you know the IGP will descend on you. And they know. There was an incident in the Upper West region where the hard-hitting regional commander, DCOP in the Kugri. If you look at what happened in the Upper West region, to be specific, and what happened in Ashanti region, the guys in the Upper West, the Wa Regional Command, they were taken hostage. Did you hear of anyone getting injured? No. No one had got injury. The police stood their ground and arrested some people and sent them to court. That is effective policing.
Okay.
But not the kind of policing where you chase little children who don't have bigger lungs and throw tear gas onto them and think that the next day you should still be there. I think this is punitive enough.
Before Bernice comes in, and maybe she'll just wrap the conversation with you, but I just wanted to sneak in. Asensi Boakye is now saying, let's investigate. Let's find out whether the teachers were involved. First of all, so two-pronged question. Is it right for him to suggest that maybe the teachers egged on the youth to go and do this? And on the other hand, is it that wrong if the teachers felt maybe, we've spoken about this time without number, it's not getting anything, so you young people go out there. What are the consequences on both sides? And if the teachers did, can they be faulted? But on the other hand, we are looking at the age of these young ones. Just digest that. What is your take from both sides?
Ben, it's disgusting. I would have wished that the Director General of the Ghana Education Service would have transferred and probably demoted the headmaster of the school, punished the teachers who opened the gate. In fact, sacked the security officials.
But do we know that for a fact, that the teachers...
Well, because, the point is that, Ben, we all attended secondary school. You need an exit to exit your secondary school. If you don't have an exit and you were caught outside the boundaries, every secondary school has a boundary. Once you leave the confine of the school without exit, you are punished. And so for instance, I have a 16-year-old daughter. If my daughter was in your school, my daughter cannot consent to certain things by herself. She will need a guardian or a parent to consent, to give her that consent. You want children to go and demonstrate. No, it is wrong, completely wrong.
But we've not proven that yet. We've not proven that yet.
Dr. Bona, and also...
Why haven't we proven... No, wait. Why have we not proven that? These children were entrusted or are entrusted into the care of the headmaster and management of the school. So you don't need any researcher to prove it to you. Because the children were on the streets.
Fair point, Dr. Bona. You have a point when you say that the students were entrusted into their care, so they must answer for why the students were on the streets. That's a fair point. But to suggest that they may have opened the gates, that's another point. And that's a different thing, because when students get agitated, and you know this better than I do, because you've studied demonstrations and police. Students
break bounds.
When they are charged, so our colleague Ohiming Teria has been trying.
There were teachers. There were teachers with them. out there.
Okay.
There were teachers leading them, and the police actually even arrested 3 of the teachers who were out there with them on the. You see, mine is that we've already had the conversation, the security aspect, which I've spoken extensively about. But the aspect of the administrators of the school allow, because this should not be an example where I take my child, a teenage child, to your school, and the next day you think that there is something wrong, and you open my teenage child to get onto the street. Is the reason why we have PTA. The reason why you have PTA, if you go to universities, as a former student leader, I didn't need the consent of my parents to go on Mobrawa struggle for Kofi Kobuachi and Co. to tear gas out because I was old enough. But if my child was in any of the secondary schools and you thought something was going wrong, you would call me as a parent into a PTA meeting and say, we want parents to demonstrate. But you can't ask children to demonstrate. So I want GES and the Ministry of Education to look into that aspect, because if this is not taken and we sweep it under the carpet, a day would come when there will be fatalities because we did not punish the administrators of Islamic secondary school. Let's speak to it and say that it should never have happened. It doesn't matter if a vehicle was knocking the students down, but the fact that the teachers were out there with the students on the street, for me, I found that to be completely wrong. Did they actually even write to, the police, requesting to demonstrate, and who was going to demonstrate? Did they call PTA into a meeting to let PTA know that, you know what, this is what is happening? They could have equally written to the director of the GES, whoever, the director of education in Ashanti region, and close down the school. There are several other measures they could have, actions they could have put in place to get the attention of the, the leaders in the region or the country. They didn't do any of that. They just opened the students, go out there. And so whilst we deal with the police officers, let's not forget that these are children and should never have had teachers leading them into a demonstration. Yeah.
All right, and so on the bit on the professionalism of police, we've also seen this week a story of a sergeant who was arrested in the Volta region for carrying substances suspected to be narcotics. His colleagues who arrested him have been promoted, and those videos were very disturbing, so I'm not sure we can show it, but in the video you see this officer with his hand bleeding, and it was a part of his skin peeled off, and it was a terrible sight. But there also you see his colleagues questioning him and asking why he didn't stop at the checkpoint and why he was carrying such substances. Some have said that the decision to promote those officers instantly will set a bad precedence. I don't know what you think of that, but your general thoughts on police allegedly being involved in crime and the response of the service to his colleagues arresting him.
Well, first of all, I would want to pat the officers who chased one of their colleagues into a ditch for carrying substances suspected to be weed or Indian hemp. Mine is that there are, some bad knocks within the Ghana police who must be weeded out. If you know of that Dedempo incident, where, some officers are currently undergoing, they are in court, they are going through having their time in court. And we've heard of several other incidents, which for me, a police officer who is trained should not be involved in this. And this officer, to be specific, from Tesano to the Volta region, in his uniform, it tells you that it's one thing I believe the IGP would have to work on. Police officers are not supposed to wear their uniform and cross one jurisdiction to the other without reporting yourself to the nearest police station. Let's say if you were in Tema region, the moment you cross into Accra region, you report yourself once you are in uniform to the nearest police station and say, I am in this territory. If you moved again to, let's say, Central Accra, you are supposed to, that is how it's supposed to be. So for this police officer to cross Tema Motorway, cross Pombaria, cross Dawenya, cross all the other places and look at where he was accosted, it tells you that somehow some of the people along the line should be questioned. But the good thing is that he was arrested. And for me, promoting these officers is a good thing. The reason is that You know what? The viewers who are watching us and yourselves, to be promoted from one rank to the other, sometimes an officer could take 10 years. You haven't been promoted. So for them arresting one of their own, and they've been used as a very good example of policing, they could have shielded him, kept quiet, and they shared the booty. You know what happened to the 77 parcels of cocaine and all those things that happened in the past. And so for they arresting him and in making sure he was taken to the hospital and, and under police guard and the Inspector General promoting them, it will serve as a deterrent to other bad knots in the service. And also an example to police officers to say, when you do well, we praise you, we would reward you. If you get it wrong, just like in the Ashanti region and this officer, we would punish you. So I think that it's a very good thing. It was done swiftly, because if you look at, I have been complaining, I have had reasons to talk about rots in the Ghana Police Service. Listen, it's not a joke. They are officers who, if you joke, they will, swindle you. And I say, and these things come to me almost all the time. And sometimes you have to call a commander to say, what is going on? Does this look like policing for you, what your officers are doing? Right. And so it's difficult. If you don't have a top person like, Dan Parry and his team, where we are getting to, things were actually bad. And where we are getting to, if he doesn't do some of this things, I tell you that things are going to be worse. So I think it's a very good thing, the police administration did.
Okie doke, Dr. Bona, I think we would have to sew it up here, but it's been refreshing. Bernice, we've been able to catch up on what we were not able to complete, the task the last time.
And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, Doc. So from one issue to the next, while we're dealing with the police, there's also nature.
The major headache.
Not nature.
No, not nature per se. Our failure.
Our failure to coexist with nature.
Exactly. I like the way you put it.
Yeah, really dealing with us here, especially in the capital city of Ghana. We're talking about floods. And this time around, we're focusing on how growing communities are contributing to the problem in Accra. We've been joined by Engineer Mahama. Good morning to you, Engineer. Thank you for joining us.
Well, good morning.
Okay, Engineer, before we zoom into how growing communities are contributing to a flood situation, I just want to satisfy my curiosity about something. So last week, Friday, it rained cats and dogs, yeah. The rain was so heavy. I mean, I had to walk through it at a point on my way home, and it was literally beating my skin. The drops were so hard.
So that one, it rained cats and chickens, or elephants.
It was very, hard rain. But on my way home, and I had to use the N1, I didn't experience much flooding. But yesterday, we had a few showers. Before I could realize, the roads were flooded, seriously flooded. So I was asking myself, what are the dynamics really? Why should we experience heavy rain, which lasted for some time? Last week, Friday, we actually had a weather warning from the Meteo. It rained throughout from about 9:30 a.m. all the way through to about 5 p.m. But yesterday, it was around 11 to about 3-ish, thereabouts, and it wasn't too heavy, but the flooding was massive. I don't understand this. Please, can you help us?
Well, I want to say good morning to both of you and all your cherished viewers. The ground is already saturated. If the ground was so dry before the rains set in, there will be high absorption, or what we call high infiltration of water into the soil. Once the soil becomes so saturated with a little drop of water, you're going to have some of these features. Now, but the roads are constructed such that ideally would have wished that all roads will be higher than the adjoining lands, so that when there's rains, the road would be singled out to be at least a mode of transportation to and fro. In some areas where you have what we call the adjoining lands are lower, you will not only do what we call direct watershed. The roads are not the ones which are causing the floods. And let me put it again that the road drainages, the gutters, let me use the word so that the layman can understand. The gutters along the road is supposed to carry the water from the road into them, and then it discharged to low-lying areas. That's why if you have the survey machine and you check the road, there's a small camber in the middle. The middle is slightly higher and it slopes to the sides of the drain. Now, when you finish a road construction and for say 3, 4, 5 years, there are no floods on that particular road, and suddenly we start to experience flooding, like I've been saying all the time, then you have to look at where the discharge points are located. It could be that instantly or within the past 1 year, some obstruction had been taking place, or people are putting up buildings or facilities within those discharge points. Because anytime we are doing road construction, what we normally do is that there is a team made up of almost all the various categories of engineering. We have the highway engineer, we have the traffic engineer, we have the materials engineer, of course, that's where I belong. We have those who are concentrating on the bridges, the structural engineers, we have administrator for legalities, and then we have hydro or hydrological engineers. They look at where the road is, the corridors of the road, and they look at possible areas where we call the catchment area, which is going to generate water onto the road, because some of the lands are higher than the road. So in areas where we feel like the elevations are higher than the road, we have to look at what kind of water will be generated from those areas onto the road, and which kind of drains will be adequate for such waters to be carried to the nearest area. So all these are done in most part of the highways that we do in the country. Now, so when you start to begin to see some of these things happening, then we'll go back to find out what may be the necessary causes that are coming as a result of the intensity of the rain. And the drains are designed such that we have what we call a 25-year design, 50-year design. That means that in about 25 years, we anticipate that there might be a certain runoff, rainfall that will be more than the normal one. How would the drains be able to accommodate and then discharge evenly? So it's interconnected. Once the roads and highways ministry are doing their roads, the department, the works and housing ministry, who are also in charge of doing their drainages within the towns, and then the sanitation, and then possibly the hydrological service department, all come together to look at how we carry all the water from the road to the low-lying area. But you see, we are having a problem in the country. You broke the news about 2 weeks ago, I think your Joy News, Joy FM, that the Auditor General's report has indicated that we are supposed to have 18 what we call retention ponds.
Right.
And now the retention pond is just like having let's say the Odo becoming like a pond. Now the retention ponds are designed to be the low-lying areas within the capital, so that it's like a dam, let's say a dam, like the Kusombo Dam, so that all the water that will be running on the surface of the earth will be captured, because we know that we cannot get all that water spreading across. So Pambros around McCarthy Hills is one typical example of more or less a natural buffer area. Unfortunately, for the past 3 years, Pambros have been taken over by huge edifices. And once you do that, you are reducing the buffer area. And that's why we have the water running on the surfaces of our land. And like I said again, the local government ministry, under which we have all the assemblies, we have to quickly adjust or amend the bylaws to actually go in line with what your colleague, the name, forgive me, your beautiful lady on set, she made cohabitation with the environment, right?
Right.
We need to create the bylaw. We have to amend the bylaw so that the pattern of water we are receiving now, we can cohabit with it. So the bylaws at the assemblies have to be clear that if you have one plot of land, you cannot tar your whole compound after you have constructed your building. If you go to Côte d'Ivoire, before you even cut a single tree in your house now, on your own compound, you have to seek approval from the local assembly. Can you imagine? A tree on your own compound? They are taking the zone, the division of the zone area very serious. Whereas we are now trying to beautify our compounds with tiles in Accra, where we have Accra is the lowest lying area, and we are receiving all the water from the top. And unfortunately for us, we are tiring the whole compound.
Engineer Mahama, okay, so the name is Bernice. She'll come in. I have an interesting bit for you on the bylaws, but you go ahead, Bernice. I'll come in after you.
Back to my question, you're talking about Accra being a low-lying area and why sometimes we may experience a few showers and still flood. Someone suggested that probably on that day, which was yesterday, it may have been raining in places like Ibri, and it was heavy, and so it was all running down. I don't know how it works, but is that possible, considering that Accra is a low-lying area?
Like, you see, I said it, I think, last year, and this year I've repeated it, that there will be a time that we will not be experiencing rainfall in Accra, but Accra will flood. I thank you for that reminder. I said there will be a time that there will not be rains in Accra, but Accra will flood. There was a heavy rain yesterday at Oyarifa, heavy rain at Ibri, Piduase, Ketase, Amasaman, and Sawam, Brekusu. And so in minutes, all those runoffs would get to Accra because we have sold out all the buffer areas around Teiman, Abokubi, Damfa, Ayimensa. All have been sold. So we're having a transition between the low-lying area and then the mountainous areas up there. So you see that when you are getting closer to Ayimensa and you look on the left-hand side, those who have been going for their normal walk on Saturdays, if you are driving towards that area, before you get to Ayimensa Old Barrier, look at the right-hand side. There are some buildings with a similar design from the low-lying area climbing steadily to the top of the mountain. It means that all those buffer areas that the Creator himself, who created these mountains, left those buffer areas so that in case there's runoff coming from the top there, it will be received. And once those places are filled, before they'll come gently to Accra, have been filled with the same boulders. Ironically, we are cutting the boulders and the rocks at the top there, and we are filling the valley. So one, you have taken off the vegetation cover, which would have retarded the speed of the water to the down there, and you are filling the buffer areas underneath the mountains with the same material to put up buildings. So those at the top there may not be experiencing the problem that we'll be experiencing in Accra. And you have just been spot on, just rehashing what I said, that we'll have rains up there, there will be drizzling in Accra. Accra will not receive any rain, but Accra will flood.
It's interesting.
I'll give you 90% for that.
Thank you.
Engineer Mahama, so you've mentioned a number of things that have got me thinking. That Ibri stretch, I use it, and it is one place when I get to. In fact, this past Saturday, I used the stretch, and as I was turning, especially before you get to where the indication is that you are maybe 400 meters away from the Ayimensa toll booth and all of that, when you look at, like you said, nature and what it's done, the boulders, and then of course we've also used in a way the mesh at a point. But when you look up there and the buildings and everything, that entire stretch in itself, when you look at some of those cliff-hanging buildings, what do you suggest we do about them? Because for me, there are disasters waiting to happen.
Yep. You know, that road, let me just rehash, that road right from Pantan Junction is my first construction after school. That road was constructed 2004 to 2007. And I'm proud to say that these are Ghanaian engineers who designed as well as a route that stayed for 15 years. At the time of the construction, we needed to expand the road. It was a very narrow road from Ayimensa to Piduase Lodge specifically. So we had to expand the road by blasting part of the mountain on the left-hand side to make way for the expansion of the size or the width of the carriageways.
Right.
So once you do what we call controlled split blasting, it will leave fractures in the mountain. So there were latest technical reports written to government that we have to do A, B, and C to be able to hold the blasted rocks which have been burned for as long as we live on this earth. And then buildings should not necessarily be constructed, like you just said, like cliffs at the edges of the mountain. The question you have to ask yourself, which I've been asking everybody, is that the lands there are so expensive. And per what I know, there's no any average middle income earner who has a land at the top there. I'm not sure that you and I can buy a land worth over $250,000.
I've seen, buildings put up there. They look like palaces. If you go through the other stretch from Mensa, if you take the left, the rough route, and you go and connect from, these are palaces, like mansions. So I agree with you on that.
So even the land is costing 200,000, 150 minimum, 250,000 USD. 2 years ago, you see, if officialdom, and I mean governments, would take some of us very serious in this country, we're going to have a lot of relief. I spoke about the Mensa that it was going to collapse. There was going to be mudslide. It happened. I said that again that we're going to have another mudslide. It happened. I said again that what has been done there was not properly done, or maybe there was no capital intensive to do the protection. And it happened again in 2019. Somewhere in 2020, the Interministerial Select Committee on Works and Housing, Roads and Highways, went to the place led by Kwame Abuja, Honorable Kwame Abuja, and then IEP, Honorable IEP. And they gave a caveat, or they gave a directive that they were not going to allow any construction to continue after their visit.
But that didn't
Just
happen.
about 3 days after, I made a video seeing a whole concrete mixer standing on the road and shooting concrete at the top there. And so we speak, we disregard the technocrat who are so vested in these things, who make pronouncements, who make predictions.
That brings me to my very next bit, and I'll just tie the two of them together. You spoke initially about bylaws, and they are simply not working. I see that to be one of the most serious problems when it comes to our flooding situation. There's a place in Jowlu around the Fiesta Royale, I'll just not mention, but it's been pointed out to me, and you would see it correctly. It's a waterway, and someone has built on the waterway. So there was no traffic. Not traffic. There was no flooding in that area. But after this person put up his or her building, now there is flooding. So even as Bernice was talking about the N1 and sometimes some things, that is a part of the problem, because maybe there's not supposed to be flooding, but once you build in a certain place where the bylaws should have kicked in, then it creates problems. But I just wanted to ask, so these roads, now that you say because of the slant, so that the water can drain to the gutters, so to speak, could wear and tear affect the road to such a point that it becomes so flat at a point that it doesn't serve that purpose? How long does this take? What should we be looking at on our roads?
No, the roads are more or less classified under flexible and rigid pavement. The Kamba is just a very small one, but fortunately for us, you don't normally see vehicles driving on the center line itself. You see that white line in the middle,
right?
That's where you have the changeover in terms of the slope, and so it stays for a very long. Normally, where you see depression, it's like when you look at 37 intersection, the traffic light, because the vehicles are almost screeching to a halt. They start to leave the tracks that we call the heaving on the path. So that's why I've always been making this advocacy that before we get to all the traffic signalized intersections, we can introduce the pavement blocks about 100 meters away, so that with the vehicles coming with that speed and applying their brakes, they will not peel off the material. But the camber doesn't actually flatten, mostly because there's so much load on the carriageway itself that it rather makes it more slopier. But it's just because the adjoining lands may be higher than the road, and once those lands are higher than the road, once the water is not having access to go into the drains or empty quickly, what we call discharging off, then you have the reverse coming onto the road. Like yesterday, I think you showed one around the High Court, where if you are the Osu bound from the High Court, the water is standing on the roadside. So I realized that they might have to create in these flutes where we can have the water discharging onto the natural ground instead of being on the road. Now, what you just said at the Fiesta Royale, like the beautiful laws you are talking about, the bylaws, apart from the bylaws of the assembly, there are 3 acts that I'm saying. Last 2 weeks, when I told you that the president's directive to the local assemblies to demolish the buildings was not necessary. If they were working, it would not be necessary. The Honorable Minister for Western Housing also stated 2 days ago that they need about $5 billion to be able to eradicate the flooding situation in Accra. But he forgot to say that if the assembly decide to work now and allow the laws to work, they have 3 laws at the assembly, apart from the bylaw. We have what we call the Land Use and Special Planning Act at 925/2016, which is one of the most important laws I've ever come across as an engineer. And they have the Local Governance Act at 936, and they have the National Building of LI 1630. But you see, where the fierce activity is happening, let me give you just one example. You see, the National Building Regulation has one nice frame, just one act. It says that the Regulation 13, Clause 2, no site liable to flooding. So in the events where you suspect that this area is a flood-prone area, no site liable to flooding shall be built upon without adequate provision for flood control. So if you take this document and you ask the assembly that you have this embodied, this document is part of the issue, the document you have to read before you issue a permit to the developer. So if the person owns the land and you feel like the person, you cannot compensate, government cannot compensate for the ownership of the land, the owner of the land is compelled to do a construction that will not bring trouble or aggravate the situation whenever there's rain. So had the person who did that construction met this law? Has he met this requirement? No. Then when you go back to the same law, where in the event where the person disregards the act and goes ahead to do his construction, the same National Building Regulation, the Land Use Act 2016 at 925 states in 121 that in the event where the man has done the construction, an authorized officer may, without notice, effect or carry out instant prohibition, abatement, alteration, removal, or demolition of an unauthorized structure. So in the event that we all establish that this building has not been authorized to be constructed at the location, rather it's creating so much nuisance to the environment and the public right of space, the same law gives the assembly the power to carry out instant prohibition, alteration. And the alteration means that they can go in and alter the design so that it will fit for purpose, that we can eradicate the problem we're having there. But if they go and they say that they cannot do any consideration to the building, they ought to carry out instant demolition.
Okay.
So the present directive was not necessary in this case when the assemblies are sleeping. And in fact, for the past 3 weeks that the president has said this, have you heard that some buildings are being removed?
Yes,
they are going around trying to observe all the buildings before, so that praying that before the rains have already gone and we'll go back and sleep. Next year we'll call again and we'll start the discussion.
So there's a story on my Joy Online related to what you're talking about, and the Institution of Engineering and Technology is asking assemblies to stop rezoning wetlands for residential areas. And obviously the warning follows the delay by the assemblies to carry out the president's directive, which you say is not necessary in the first place because it is mandated by law for them to do this. And so clearly it makes me wonder if, just like it is for other sectors, we have the wrong people at our assemblies, because I'm just thinking, just listening to you as a professional, definitely foreseeing the consequences of our actions and being passionate about it, makes me wonder that if there are indeed professionals at these assemblies, they must be feeling the same thing that you're feeling. Is it a case they don't have the will to do the job? Is it a case that their jobs are being interfered with? Or we don't have professionals there at all?
Or is it the case that they are professional, they see it, but of course palms are greased and they turn a blind eye to it?
All the assumptions that you have made is true. There is political interference. Otherwise, we will not have the buildings on the Lansah stretch. Like I told you, if you are paid even 5,000 Ghana per month, you cannot raise $180,000 to go and buy a land. So you should know that those who come and sit on our platforms and speak and talk about bemoan what is happening in Accra are the same people that when they close, they climb up there and go and sleep on the mountain. There are engineers at the assembly who I think may have to go for refresher courses. A lot of them to have the greasing of palms. And others are, when they do the right thing by sending documents to their special committee, technical committee for approval, or when they deny, sometimes the MMMDCs who are supposed to champion the demolition, we tell them that this document, this person's land here cannot be tampered because it's from A, B, C, and D quarters. You see, what we said about the wager stretch, you played my video the last time. When, for the first time, we've recorded 3 days of non-usage of a road. So if such a person speaks months ahead that this year, per the observation that I personally made on the wager stretch with my own team, without government financing it, the passion I have for the country, I drove on a Sunday, observed the whole mountain, and I did my own research and came out with a find that for the first time, when we rains for less than maybe 72 hours, the Accra bound stretch from the wager will be blocked completely to traffic. And I want you to just let your viewers go on at Mahama_Abdullahi and check what I said on the 29th day of March, 16 days or so after, the first time in the history of this country, the whole Accra bound stretch was blocked for 72 hours. There was no thoroughfare on that road. And so whatever you have said is true. And then for Bernice, and my colleague, other colleague, for me, I will say it on your records again, I cannot work for the assemblies. You know why? Because I will use the law to the latter, and I'll be transferred, or they will find a way to get you out of the assembly. I've been saying this, that the will to work at the assembly, any government that comes for us to work, will give them the terms and conditions, because I will not allow your mother, my mother, any pensioner who has put up a building 20 years ago to suffer because of a developer who has come after 20 years to come and put up a filling station or a warehouse to block the channel for somebody who's a pensioner to suffer until the person.
So obviously, engineer, you are a rare breed, but we have to still have the conversation. I'll just end with these comments so we move on from here. But Elisha Benning is also an expert in this area. He sends me some interesting thoughts. He says, the answer is more of wrong design concept to construction methodology approach. He says, Ghana needs only $3.45 million to solve this problem. Forever with storm drains championing the collection of surface runoff to electro chambers than convert the kinetic energy in the runoffs into electro currents. I'm not a technical person. That's why I'm reading it while you are here. And he says, until we're ready to stop and correct the wrongful positioning of buildings, we'll not be able to solve the situation. I guess if we don't do the right things, like you're saying, we'll be back here again the next rain cycle. We'll be back here because
sadly,
it is.
Sadly, because and do you know? I think
and just briefly on this, Engineer Muhammad.
Yes, I was on your program on 2 days ago, evening 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, with one technical director from the Works and Housing Ministry, that they are creating another authority, the Hadu Service Authority. And I asked the question: if the assemblies are not ensuring that buildings are put in their right places, what will be the use of the authority?
Good question.
Like I said, we'll come back next year to come and face this problem. But people should look at my platform very well. I'm so passionate about one thing, the built environment. Nothing more, nothing less. And I want to say it on records again. I don't need any government support. I don't need any government appointment. Unless, of course, it's within the means of handling this job so much without any interference. I don't want it.
Engineer Muhammad, we're grateful
to have their peace of mind.
We're grateful that you've joined us this
much,
morning. Engineer Abdullahi Muhammad, road and building consultant.